What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the CoinGeek Weekly live stream. I am your host, Mr. Kirk Wookert Jr., rocking live from South Florida, and we've got Alex Vidal at the DJ booth. He's spinning those rockin' tunes digitally, and we're doing a good show. So part of being in South Florida and it being late July means we are dead smack in the middle of hurricane season. We do not currently have a hurricane upon us, but I keep hearing some serious thunder. So if we get some kind of weather or something that knocks us down, I apologize in advance. There's nothing I can do about the weather, at least not yet. I'm trying to bribe my local HARP operator to see if we can make the weather do exactly what we want it to do. So if you're watching, I appreciate you. Thank you kindly. If you could like, subscribe, hit the alert bell so that you know every time we go live across all of social media, I would appreciate it immensely. And so would my captors. I mean, my sponsors. So everybody, if you feel like sponsoring the show, I implore you, I challenge you, I occasionally beg you, please reach out to Mr. Alex Vidal to talk about sponsorship opportunities. You can get into the highly coveted 24 to 38-year-old white, bald male demographic plus Rachel Brady and Casey Hamilton, who I think are my two female fans. So ladies, thank you kindly for watching. And to the rest of you gentlemen, please tell your friends and please bring in your girlfriends, wives, or I guess your mothers if you want to bring the demographic and flatten things out here for everybody's sake. We are going to be talking today to Mr. Bryan Daugherty about a little cybersecurity issue that you may have heard of in the news over the last 10 or so days. And it may or may not be a little more than just a mistake, but we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty details as those come. But if you are watching the show now, you should know that it is sponsored by a few people. We have Rock Wallet, who's been very kind to sponsor the show on an ongoing basis. We also have the Champions folks who have been so kind to sponsor the show by handing out to the commenter of the day a deck of cards, a pack of cards, so you can play the extremely fun and exciting and rewarding Champions TCG game. So thank you, Champions, for your support of the show as well. We appreciate you. And of course, CoinGeek for publishing and making all of this possible. And speaking of CoinGeek, my article today, hot dog specialist. Yes, Joey, I am indeed a hot dog specialist. So if everything in my universe falls apart, I will go back to being a very, very talented chef of sorts. So if it is based on meat and is delicious, I'm quite good at preparing it. So I will always be employable in the kitchens of the world, no matter what happens with Bitcoin. Speaking of Bitcoin, yeah, I wrote an article that came out this morning, actually. I just published it as my pinned tweet, talking about some of the political ramifications of what's going on with the orange one. We're gonna make Bitcoin great again. So he spoke in Nashville last week and had some intrigue about it, but I think there's ultimately not the greatest second and third order effects of what's going on over there. But I would challenge you, please check my pinned tweet. Please read the article. I would love your feedback. The most helpful thing you can possibly do is give a repost, and also if you could comment, if you could just give me a tremendous comment, that'd be really nice. So please go ahead and do that for me. I would appreciate it very, very much. So before any further nonsense from me, if you could again like, subscribe, hit the alert bell. We are going to cut to an ad, and we will be right back with Bryan Daugherty. Hey.
Mr. Wookert, it's great to join you today, brother.
It's good to be here, man. How you been?
Very well, very well. I just got back from Cleveland not too long ago, a couple days ago, doing some on-the-ground research. And yeah, it's been an interesting week of information security topics as well. So happy to jump in on those topics there.
So yeah, it's been crazy. I've been trying to catch up on. I mean, I know vaguely who CrowdStrike is and what they're supposed to do, but you start digging into how deep their rabbit hole goes, and in government security and cybersecurity, working with major players, stuff can get a little bit murky. So I'm a little bit unclear on what is just sort of your conspiracy theory, propaganda, whatever, versus what is the marketing PR for a company like CrowdStrike. Because again, when your clientele are the most valuable, most important, or most secure things in the world, and then just all of a sudden there's a weird incident that brings down half the internet, it feels like there should be a broader investigation. And so I'm curious, can you fill us in, like, who are CrowdStrike? What do they do? I know for a fact you've been digging into this harder than me, which is why I brought you onto the show. But yeah, let me know, like, what do you think? First of all, who is CrowdStrike, and what do you think is going on? Maybe behind the headline.
Sure. Yeah, CrowdStrike is probably one of the most premier cybersecurity services that are out there. They typically work with the most upper echelon companies and governments. I think we've heard from back in 2016, they really became prominent with the Russian collusion hack, or the DNC hack. There's a lot there as well, especially for those people who like to think about, strings being attached on a wall. I think the most significant thing about the company is that they really haven't had much for competition. And that's, typical within the technology adoption industry, where these governments are looking for the most innovative technologies, but typically, the smaller innovative technology companies are the last to actually be brought on. But CrowdStrike, I thought, what was most interesting out of all of it here in today's news was their compensation for the outage that took place. They actually gave all of their customers a $10 Uber Eats card. Delta today found that kind of obnoxious and said, we're actually going to sue you for $500 million worth of damages. So,
yeah, who gets it at Delta? Like everyone at Delta, or just like the one? Like, here's the CEO of Delta gets an Uber Eats card.
That's a good question. I wonder if they just sent one card or all. I saw a lot of the scenes. I mean, it actually was transpired days after the outage, where they were impacted across various airlines and various airports, where people are standing in line for days, right? I mean, I have a problem for just a 45-minute line, but yeah, that's probably not going to go over well either. But I mean, I just think when you get back down to the, like, okay, what happened, right? We had somebody that issued an update on a Friday at 2 a.m., which is just kind of strange anyways in its own right. I mean, we've all heard of the term Patch Tuesday. There's a reason for that, right? In the sense of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just in case there was a mistake, you have people there to work, and you're not paying them double or triple overtime. And then ultimately, we saw just the down the line impact, which is something I've been speaking about for years now, with these cyber events. One dominoes sets off this chain of events that at this point in our life and culture and our ways, that it just stops everything. And you could imagine what a World Economic Forum concept of a cybersecurity event like this, as they predicted, what that would actually cause in terms of damage. I mean, we're probably talking in the billions of damage already, if not beyond that.
Yeah, some crazy number, I'm sure. So let me just to get into a little bit what's happened, really just looking at like the last 3 weeks. Like, we've had an attempted assassination of a presidential candidate, not just any presidential candidate, but probably the most controversial presidential candidate in a generation. We've seen the sitting president of the United States decide, like, hey, I'm not going to run for re-election, which is hasn't happened again in like 2 generations. So we've got a lot of unprecedented stuff. Now, one of the things that the sort of insider pundits, I still kind of hang out in cybersecurity circles a little bit, is a lot of people put their alarm bells up to, okay, just in case this assassination is not just some lone wolf guy from Pennsylvania, like, maybe this is Iran, North Korea, maybe this is some, deep state faction or whatever else. Like, we can all put on whichever tinfoil hat we want. But ultimately, the cybersecurity professionals that I know went into, higher DEFCON alert situation to say, hey, we should keep an eye out for, other things that might happen in tandem to this. And then, what was it, 3-4 days after the attempted Trump assassination, then there's, the most significant cybersecurity event in the last 5 years or so, and bringing down major infrastructure. So, what are your thoughts on this being? Is this just, CrowdStrike is a company that doesn't have any competitors and they got lazy and they pushed a bad patch and took down half the internet, or what are the odds that there's some other thing going on here in your opinion, Brian? Brian.
Well, I mean, there's certain protocols that they follow to release a patch in the first place, right? And they're certified in the sense of how they've you know how they plan out their releases, and they didn't follow that, right? They just pushed it out widely and probably recklessly. And obviously that had a major impact. But again, you're tying a bunch of different strings together, which, is there some, more sinister motive or larger group that is in control of our networks? Well, let's go back to the problem, right? The problem is in today, actually, IBM just released their 23rd or 24th breach report, which is available online. I suggest anybody go get it. And what they're highlighting is it takes 292 days to actually identify a breach. Well, what happens within that 292 days that somebody is on your network? I mean, it doesn't just say, hey, I'm going to go hack, a telecommunications company or energy company in France, and I'm going to take down the entire electric grid, right? And I'm just going to do that on a whiff. I mean, there's tons of planning and event that has to occur, whether it's social manipulation, right? That you're going to have to get some of the actual authorizations that you need to access that network or breach the network, or whether it's you're just gonna blast your way through and try to get in there no matter what. But typically these things are planned out months and months, and
Yeah.
once they're in there, what we're noticing and what the statistics have showed us for 20 plus years is that it's over 200 days and it's getting worse, right? Technology is getting better, but just the detection that somebody's walked in your house, imagine, right? You probably have some very nice things in your house, and 292 days later you're looking for that beautiful watch of yours, and you have no idea where, what, who, when, where. Right. And you're probably blaming your wife or the kids and,
Right.
everything else. But I mean, that's one of the key issues that I see is first and foremost. I mean, we can talk about the infrastructure pieces, but I think first and foremost, technology today does not allow us to detect at the earliest possible moment when a breach occurs. And the actual practices that we put in place disincentivize honesty by those people who have been breached. Why? Because in today's report, it's actually let's see, it's over $1 million once law enforcement gets involved. And that's typically higher than the ransomware that they pay, right? So if I'm going to have to pay just a fine to the US government or whomever, if I've been breached, then where am I incentivized after paying, $200,000 to unlock these encrypted records? Why do I want to go tell on myself and then have to pay more fines, right? And then on top of that, the reputation damage and the risk that you're running about, that potential breach. And I would say CrowdStrike, especially with the Uber Eats cards, is really going to start feeling it on their bottom line, right? And it erodes the trust that any company can have in those people that are supposed to be on the front lines of detection. And these are supposed to be the premier group. And what I'm saying is it doesn't matter if it's that premier group or another company that's utilizing the same infrastructure. It doesn't matter. It's because the infrastructure that we have today highly incentivizes cyber attackers to go and attack a honeypot of information. And until you know, decentralize those records and maybe even add economic, you know, barrier to accessing those records, you know, you're going to have the same issues, right? It doesn't matter what detection software you're
Yeah.
utilizing. You're going to have those same infrastructure issues. And, you know, I always kind of giggle. I go to all these conferences and, you know, people talk about technology like AI and how they're going to, you know, implement AI to, you know, solve cybersecurity issues. Yeah, it definitely helps, right? But, you know, even in the integrity of the AI itself, you need blockchain. Blockchain isn't a new component, right? It's a maybe a Lego piece to TCP/IP, right? But ultimately, it decentralizes the heavy reliance on trusted third parties and allows
Yeah.
us a native way to monetize files.
So let's drill into that a little bit. But before we do, if you could mute yourself, I'd appreciate it. I hear myself on echo. So I'd like to point out that while we're talking, I have an imposter in the comments here trying to scam BTC out of people by doing a send me BTC and I'll send you back more scam, which you would think wouldn't work, but the stats on that are insane. There's a lot of money going around on that kind of nonsense too. So like, hey, what if we use blockchain for identity in order you had to pass an identity check in order to post as a person, and I wouldn't have literal scammers impersonating me on my show to try to do this. So this is a good timing to my third world imposter grifter friends who are taking it to us right now. But aside from identity as a first predicate for pushing any information out on the internet, what are some other particulars? You know, you mentioned you know, monitoring, reporting, that kind of thing. But if we talk about using blockchain as a building block, or I think you said the word Lego piece in the TCP or TCP/IP stack. Like, what does that look like in practical terms? If we were to, you know, talk to some of the people that actually are working in the ISP space, or if you got FaceTime with like Comcast and AT&T and T and Verizon and Vodafone and, you know, whoever else is providing internet around the world, and say, hey guys, like, let's head this direction and make it a 3-year plan or something. What are you know, steps 1, 2, and 3 on achieving this practically, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's, you know, that's a tough question. That's probably one of the toughest questions I've been asked. I mean, ultimately, blockchain is the, you know, communication aspect, right? It's the rail for the communication to occur on. When you combine it with TCP/IP, now you're amplifying the ability to send securely in a immutable envelope data packets. You know, it works exactly the same way that TCP/IP works today. It just enhances it with much more security, and allows you to decentralize those records. It doesn't mean you're required to, but it allows you to. You know, when you start looking at how blockchain is best implemented, say in the infosec world today, I think there's, you know, some bigger barriers. Obviously, there's various compliances that are required specifically in the US, you know, to get, you know, companies comfortable with utilizing the technology. So the way that I look at, sort of piecing this off or educating people is more so through the framework of the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is what they're familiar with. I mean, you brought up the very first one, identity, right? I mean, once you start, you know, aligning, using BSV as an overlay network to align the features and functions like timestamping and uh, microtransactions and the rest to, the NIST cybersecurity framework and what those actual requirements are or best practices. Now you can start to piecemeal the technology into the stack, right? So, for example, CERTIHASH, Sentinel node, dealing with detection, right? You would think we'd start with identity, but we're not ready for that yet, right? I think there's a lot of education that has to occur there, but obviously with identity, we start to mitigate almost all of the cybersecurity issues that we can actually change, hardware, software wise. But we started with detection because it's probably the biggest pronounced issue, with 200 and now 92 days to detect a breach. But it was also a way to kind of relate the features and functions of blockchain, of how it can be applied to provide these value propositions that Web 2 is just lacking. And so when you start to say, well, how does it best be implemented in the stack? Ultimately, I see it pieced off in these various segments of NIST, right? Of where an innovator or a laggard of a company feels comfortable implementing technology, whether that is just for file monitoring and integrity, or whether that's for something more pronounced like identity. And as this infrastructure becomes much more integrated into these systems through various applications, I think there's another evolution that occurs. It's the reality that we no longer need somebody like CERTIHASH, and this is horrible for me to say as a company, but like I really feel like nobody's going to want somebody in between them and their data. I mean, and that's exactly what occurred with CrowdStrike. You have somebody that's required to be there only by necessity, right? And if you're able to remove them from being in between you and your data, then you have less an attack vector surface to be attacked from. And ultimately, when this technology really takes hold, I do see the larger governments, the military, the upper echelon of the enterprise communities developing these solutions on their own because they don't need that third party. Um, and as a CertaHash Sentinel node, I think that that's where it fits into those companies that do need the expertise, the mid market, the small business, and the home users. And there'll be people that require, just like anybody else, those type of services. But ultimately, blockchain allows us to have a more parallel network that reduces, the core aspect of information security, which is the confidentiality of records, the integrity of records, and the availability of records, right? And I think that's the biggest way to relate this technology into the infosec world, is to relate it back down to these core concepts of the triad of information security,
Yep.
the NIST cybersecurity framework, and it's very much like TCP/IP has been, fit together, but like Legos over the course of time. These smaller, layers that we're discussing today really start getting implemented as a main stack, like a best practice. I'm waiting for NIST, framework 3.0 to be released, within the next few years, that utilizes, AI and blockchain to really, improve uh, improve upon these gaps in our infosec world that we have today, that can't be solved by today's technology. I mean,
Yep.
ultimately, no matter what layers of security that you're adding, you still have the core incentivization by those attackers to come after you in the first place. If I know that you've got, 100 pounds of gold bullion in your house, I'm going to find a way to get into your house, right?
Right.
And that's, data is valuable. It is the new oil, and the more that we pretend that we have more robust and resilient networks, the more that we're going to find that they're not. And whether it's, one day you wake up and the entire energy infrastructure has been shut down, or the water infrastructure, the transportation, whether it's the hospitals that get bricked next time, and your care is being taken care of by pencil and pad, these
Yeah.
things will come
Yeah.
home to really to make an impact on your life, just like we saw over the last few weeks.
So let's talk a little bit about, and I mean, you've been on my show 3 or 4 times, and we've talked about CertaHash at length. Maybe you could give me the 1 minute version of CertaHash, and how CertaHash as a tool set could have helped mitigate some of what happened here. But you also have a whole suite of things that you're working on in the cybersecurity space. And I don't know how many people are aware just how much stuff is actually going on with your team, which is focused on an entire suite of cybersecurity tooling. So let's give the micro pamphlet version of CertiHash, and let's talk a little bit more about like what else your company offers. I mean, since you're telling us ways that we can make your company obsolete, let's do the pitch for you. So we can make a little bit of money in the interim before the the meta net of reality takes over our communications.
Yeah, so CertiHash was actually, designed to enhance the NIST cybersecurity framework. And very much like I said earlier, the education, just where we are between blockchain and the conflation of cryptocurrencies, and just the idea that, I mean, you go and talk to anybody in the cybersecurity world and talk to them about Bitcoin or blockchain, and they're butt puckers because typically that's what they have to pay in ransomware, right? They're not thinking that this is a technology that enhances their information security practices. So we really wanted to start with something that was a huge problem, which was detection. Obviously, it's gotten worse since we first started. It was 220 days and 212 days, and now 292 days to identify a breach, right? So it's going in the wrong directions. It's getting costlier. It used to be $5.4 million is the average cost of a breach beyond 30 days. It's now closer to $6 million. So these are significant issues that, obviously pick up a paper any day that having any college, any hospital, any government is facing. So we wanted to highlight, the ability of blockchain to provide real-time file monitoring and integrity of those files. So what we're able to utilize blockchain is taking a fingerprint of a state of a network every 10 seconds, which we can get down to a blink of an eye, 0.03 seconds of that state of that network. And as you can tell, if it's write only or write once, read only, now you have the ability when a record changes, which say your log files should never change, right? 86% of all hacks include a file change to your logs, right? To where they're hiding, their IP or the way that they've come in. So now if I tell you right now that utilizing just, a simple hash of network state and taking that every 10 seconds and comparing it to the previous, we can now detect instantly if your network has been breached. Would that be something you're interested in? Right? Obviously, because it comes at a significant cost, $6 million just for that 30-day breach. And it lowers the time and down the line impact that all the rest of your people that are on your network, vendors and service providers and everybody else, that they're potentially going to be impacted by this. And we saw this more so with SolarWinds, where you had 36,000 direct customers and then another 36,000 indirect customers.
Yeah, cascades.
Yeah. So now, with CertiHash, it's that suite of, actually we say 5, but it's more like 7 different applications. Sovereign Shield, well, let me back up. CertiHash Sentinel node is available commercially today. I think we do almost 50% of all the transactions on the BSV blockchain at this point, and have for quite some time. It's been very successful in educating and really fortifying networks of the partners that we've been able to bring in and test out this new technology. So we're extremely excited about that aspect. But, it's funny because the education has caught up to some of the innovation that we've developed, right? So now that we have Sentinel node, it's funny to see people start talking about identity. And this is something that has been, prominently discussed even in the last 4 months, say in the BSV blockchain world, where, they're discussing a lot about identity solutions and how this is important. And, yes, this is vitally important. And, when you start implementing it into identity, into the NIST cybersecurity framework, we start to see how, we can mitigate DDoS, we can mitigate brute force attacks very simply, like super, super simple, right? That is very easily explainable to anybody. And when they sort of ponder the solution, they're like, yes, that works. But I mean, we've gone beyond that to and started integrating even some of the um, other aspects of recovery, which really brings us to the CrowdStrike topic. CertiHash Sentinel node is actually deployed on a single universal source of truth, right? We do not have mirrored sites that might have malware injected into it. You can see the sign off of the signature of the latest update when you grab it. So that really mitigates a lot of issues that we saw with CrowdStrike, and ultimately in the recovery realm as well, in the essence of being able to recover images of networks that you've been able to save on chain, right? To have that integrity of that data ensured at least from that timestamp moment. But there's a lot of different ways to use all of these different functions and features, whether you're talking about identity, whether you're talking about recovery or response, to integrate them all together. Because again, if you look at blockchain as an overlay network, you're using all these functions and features to empower each other. So whether it's utilizing, single source for the deployment of the software, or whether it's using the single source for, maintaining the integrity of the state of the network, all of these things can be applied, utilizing microtransactions or just your public-private key pair to access control. There's so many different realms within blockchain that you could just piece off one specific application at a time. But what we've decided to kind of provide is an overall NIST 3.0 or 4.0 or however you want to call it, blockchain empowered framework that really starts to allow companies to take the ideas and the premises that we developed over the last 5 years and build on them. Because again, yes, we want CertIhash Sentinel node everybody to use it. And I feel like it adds a tremendous value today, right now. I mean, 292 days at a cost of 6 million, CertIhash is going to be your best friend at that point.
That's huge.
Right. But ultimately, I see where, I've had conversations with DHS, Interpol, DOD. They can't utilize a system like that. These things need to be air gapped. I mean, they have their own protocols and regulations that they have to follow. So, and I would advocate them as an InfoSec, person to not have somebody as an intercessor between their data, and this technology allows them to do that. So ultimately, we want to provide the education for a more, secure infrastructure that has less attack vectors and has more redundancy built in, resiliency built in. And, ultimately it's, I hate to say it, but a 5, 10, 15-year education cycle, but it begins with what we're doing as proof of concepts and commercial applications that can be integrated to show the value proposition. But these have to be built in and reiterated on. I think one of the things that, really sets us apart from, a lot of other blockchain companies or even information security companies is we actually go and try to find the problems that exist that the foremost experts couldn't solve with today's technology. And we bring them in, right? People like Danny Pahar, Sean Coleman, that just have this wealth of information that have been understood the issues that we've had as far as infrastructure, and now have come to the light of, wow, we can now solve these things. And not only that, they have the intimate knowledge of specific SCADA systems and integrate, various industrial applications that require specific elements that we can provide, but until we're aware of them, we would never be able to create them.
Absolutely.
So my yeah, go on.
Well, a couple things. For anybody watching, we do give away a champions deck of cards to the best comment of the day. That'll be chosen by me and Alex Vidal. Toward the end of the show, we'll announce whoever wins. So please get your questions, comments, blessings, cursings, and whatever else you got. You can win a free prize here by giving a good question or a good comment here on the show. So it's there's so much here to unpack, Bryan, and I always struggle with cybersec, like teaching cybersec stuff to a general audience, because I think everybody just kind of assumes their cybersecurity is pretty okay. Like if you haven't had your identity stolen in 10 years, it's like, I don't know, is any of this really a problem? But then you get these letters in the mail that are like, oh, hey, by the way, you were breached by, some account you had somewhere 15 years ago, and now your data has been leaked on the dark web. And like we'll give you free credit at monitoring and whatever else. But when you look at these things, it's so systemic and it's so deep. Like there's so many building blocks to, even if we clean this up. Like I literally just got one in the mail, and it was from I didn't even know, it was like something related to an old social media account. It was like Zanga or something. It wasn't Zanga, but it was like Zanga. And I was like, wow, like what, like where is that data sitting if I haven't used it in 15 years? Like somebody has my data sitting on a database that is apparently hot, connected to the internet, and can be noodled into by some hacker that's looking to get information out. It's funny because I got a thing saying like, well, part of the reason was your password, and it was a password that I had set up in like 2003, 2004. Like we're talking like late AOL era use of the internet. And like, I set up something like, Kurt likes polo shirts for my for my freaking password, and then reuse that password. And so it allows people to jump into like, well, we don't only have your Zanga, but we also have your MySpace account. We have all this stuff. I'm like, is that valuable? But then I think back and think like, well, I don't know. Like I don't remember what information I put on these things. And so all that to say, if we're going to sort of rethink these things, like how much legacy backport, like cleaning up do you have to do? This is a little bit like when you lived in a house for 20 years and you have to move, and you realize like, oh, I put this box in this closet 20 years ago, and here's these pictures I thought didn't exist anymore, or whatever it is. But my question is there a way to get to a point where we no longer have to worry about, hey, did I open a credit card with Home Depot 20 years ago and I forgot, or my Zanga account, or my whatever? Is there a way that we can basically make a checkpoint where, okay, we have redesigned and then re-implemented ourselves into a future that is no longer a giant risk, or there's always going to be a legacy problem that we always kind of have to monitor for? And basically, I don't know if there's a strong like this is the answer, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like, is that kind of a thing possible, or are we always going to have some legacy dependencies that we're going to have to mitigate for?
Well, I think if we had like an EMP or a major cybersecurity attack, and the idea of Mr. Robot comes true, I mean, who knows? Like we could have a start over. I don't. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't foresee that company coming or anything, but like
Skynet decides your history has been deleted.
yeah, the last few months have been the last few years have been so weird that I'm not going to assume I know what the future holds. But I think we start to see the pieces get implemented, and as the pieces, and this is where I think opportunity lies, right? And this is where the market decides, because if you're a company and I tell you, if you use Sovereign Shield, which is our identity solution at CERTIHASH, and it definitely mitigates say brute force attacks and DDoS, then is that valuable to you, right? And if your competition is not using it, but they're being DDoSed and they're being brute force attacked, and their name is being run in the paper and everything else, right? The market speaks there, right? So the market has its own forces, and potentially those companies will be struggling that don't start integrating or becoming the innovators, right? The On the innovation rather than the laggard side of implementing newer innovative technologies. And this goes to why our government networks so twisted or open, right? They're not supposed to be. And that's because, the issues that we have is that we have large conglomerates, like I shared in the beginning, that kind of dictate what technologies are uptaken by the government. I think you probably saw maybe a couple of years, I think it was Google and Amazon were going head to head over DoD cloud infrastructure, right? And then ultimately a judge got involved because of all the craziness that occurred between that RFP process, and ultimately had to make that decision. But unfortunately, those companies take the oxygen out of the room for the small
Yep.
niche companies
Yep.
like CERTIHASH, to implement something new. And, unfortunately, the market also needs to speak and hold various companies accountable for the statements they make, very much like greenwashing statements. There might be some cause of concern for cyber incident statements where you claim that your software is instant. Well, none of these legacy softwares are providing instant detection if the average detection day is 292 days and has been over 200 days for 10 years. It's exactly why I got into blockchain in 2016, because I wanted to solve these core issues of breaches and cybersecurity issues that were the number one complaint of my customers. It was the number one thing they could spend money on. And after years of selling them updated devices and software and new whistles and stuff, I realized those things were just all open source additions that didn't really solve the problems that these people were having issues with. And now we're in a place to where, I mean, you have companies that can't even negotiate to get cyber insurance at this point, right? Because they're too much of a risk. And it's been, it's not their fault, they're the risk, right? But again, I think that's where technology always seems to kind of come in every 20, 30 years, shake things up, and force people to do things that are much more rational, right? And we have new technologies that are available today: blockchain, AI, IoT, the rest, biometrics, right? To allow us to integrate all of these into a stack that provides more resilient systems. And until we allow that to occur, and it's a cultural thing as well, until we allow the cultural uptake of this education and technology. And I mean, just think about everything the consumer has faced, whether you're looking at a product on the shelf in the supermarket and it says it's organic, but it's been sprayed with pesticides because it met a threshold and allowed them to
Right.
still say it was organic. Or whether it's a detection software that says we're the greatest in the industry and we provide instant detection, even though you're not going to find out for 292 days. What are we willing to accept, and what are we willing to allow our data, right? And that becomes down to the consumer as well. Everybody says, I always loved when everybody said own your own data, but what does that mean? It actually requires a lot of education on that part, because right now people like easy stuff, right? I don't have to worry about it when I log into my banking account. It's on them, right? But if I have to maintain my own data, maintain my own private keys, maintain all this, there's obviously education that has to occur there. But that also, I would say, occurs within our own. If data is the new oil and we're willing to throw oil on Facebook, oil on Twitter or X or wherever, then we have to be mindful of what we're sharing and what those terms and conditions at the bottom of the long scroll that you just press the button actually mean, especially now where it could include your likeness, it could include your home data. I mean, and ultimately you may be a subject of testing, social manipulation testing for years and years to come.
Yep.
And if the product is free, you are the product, right? So we need to change our own mindset as far as the value that we provide as consumers. The data that we have is extremely valuable, and how do we want to approach that as far as is is my data safe on your network? What systems do you use on your network? And if you can't provide me, an idea that you're going to, protect my data and not provide me a $10 Uber Eats card, or potentially, even a year monitoring, because what happens after 2 years, right? My data is still on the dark web. But the answer to your question, I guess, like, I think it just gets piecemealed in, and it's these companies that start integrating something that you can do more, do it faster, right? And you can do more with it, right? Once you start integrating and they start to see the value proposition of the technology, it becomes second nature of integrating it. And as a bonus, your information security improves, your data integrity improves, and your overall operational efficiency improves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so obvious. Obviously, it's a lot of work, but I often say this when I talk about a lot of things, but technology in general, or when I'm teaching jujitsu, or like a lot of these things they're simple, but they're not easy. Like the framework is here you go. It's just these couple of things, but then each thing is its own process and life cycle, and it's rough. We're gonna take a few questions from the comment box. We got our loyal watchers with some good questions. So, Mr. Vidal, let's bring up a few of these things rapid fire. I understand that IBM helped develop CertiHash. Have they adopted it for any of their security in house to bolster their security? If not, why? Muted.
Sorry. Great question. We worked with IBM initially to really kind of twofold. One, educate them on the technology that's available. I mean, this is CertiHash is something that we could have developed with in-house or with other developers within the ecosystem, but we thought that the opportunity to work with IBM, their name, I mean, obviously I've referred to their breach report of 24 years now, or 23 years. They are a leader in the space as far as detection. And I think what a lot of the comments that they have shared with us, since then, and during that time period of development, they foresaw CertiHash, and I believe I still have this pinned on my X account, as a software suite that will be very recognizable within the industry. They were very impressed with the ability to kind of cut that detection time down. We had a few preliminary talks with some of their internal cybersecurity teams, mainly their European side. We were going to kind of connect with their US cyber side, but that really hasn't kind of occurred over the last, year or so. I think where we're really looking to kind of integrate the technology, or the roadmap that we've decided to go down, working with cyber insurance companies, telecommunication companies, cybersecurity service providers, is just a better avenue for us. And not that I don't or wouldn't want IBM to utilize CertiHash, and we certainly would white label the technology for them to integrate to their own systems. But yeah, it's just not something that has occurred.
All right, good stuff. We've got Zap, or next one. Uncle Josh, one of our most loyal fans, asking, CertiHash reminds me of an airplane's black box. Is it a good way to summarize at least part of what it does?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there definitely is some forensic intelligence that you can gather from our system post-hack, right, or post-breach. And also that includes internal. I mean, we overlook, we always say, we think of some, guy behind a, desk with a hoodie on in a dark room and tons of blue lights is trying to hack in, but sometimes it's your employees, right? So, yeah, it definitely allows you to understand what actions were also taking place once the breach was identified. And when you think about this within the cybersecurity insurance realm, when I need to see what type of a risk your company is, how long did it take you to react to a potential breach on your network, and what were the actions that you took to mitigate that? Well, all of that is actually encapsulated within a transaction, right? That we capture for CertiHash. And, all of this data allows for intelligent decision making in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Hector, why did CertiHash choose to use a blockchain as the timestamp server over a third-party solution like DigiCert? This is actually a good question. So one of the things I get from a lot of people, because I talk about CertiHash quite a bit when I'm asked about, like, well, what is something like? Is anybody actually using blockchain? And we'll often reference CertiHash, and then I have gotten that feedback a couple times and say, well, couldn't you just set up a distributed system in AWS or something that is doing this? But DigiCert is another one of those things. What's your response to that?
It really comes down to the proof of work consensus mechanism for me, right? I think that is ultimately the checks and balances, and then provides, a significant portion of the information security and data integrity of those records. I mean, again, I'll go back to the triad of information security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability of records. So it also provides the availability of those records. And as we saw, even with CrowdStrike, when these systems were bricked, they weren't even able to connect to the internet to update their systems. I think, what I love about blockchain is the resiliency that it provides for, even muting an attacking node, or isolating attacking nodes. So it's really comes down to the data integrity that proof of work provides. And it goes back to this idea, right, that you don't need to use a third party. And I think that ultimately the concept of sticking information in a big pot of, that somebody is going to be incentivized to attack. Like, I'm not putting, $100 billion of bullion in my house and broadcasting it so people would be looking to do that. I think ultimately CertiHash uses blockchain to decentralize those records with an economic value that makes it economically unviable for somebody to attack.
Sure. Good response. We have a few questions left here. I was going to say maybe we save this one till after the meme of the day, but Bryan, I want you to think about the correct way to dress a hot dog. We're going to do the meme of the week rather, and we'll be back in, I don't know, 60 or 90 seconds. Uh-oh. Where are we at with the meme?
And now it's time for the meme of the week.
Why don't you break this down simply for people like me that don't fully understand it?
Okay.
You were if you went out the yield curve on bonds, or if you went in.
Sure.
Is constantly growing. It's happening as all of these new companies,
So let's just start at the beginning, if you don't mind explaining, what is it?
Sure.
Classic exasperated Michael Saylor. All right, Bryan, I think this is going to be one of these recurring questions that we go to. What is the correct way to dress a hot dog, Mr. Daugherty?
Well, I am an subject matter expert in dressing hot dogs, apparently, because Costco hot dogs started following me today. So they must have thought that this question was going to come to play. And so, honestly, there's only one real way to dress a hot dog.
Oh boy.
You have to split it down the middle, right? You're adding cheese. You're adding chili. You're adding ketchup, mustard. And that's it.
Good times. As a Chicagoan, I have to debate you on the ketchup thing, but we can do that in person. So I do love a good chili dog, though. In fact, I explained the Chicago style last week, but then said, like, I'm willing to accept chili cheese dog, but if I'm going chili cheese, I want chili, cheese, and onion, and I'm very, very happy. So, Bryan, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for explaining this stuff, because cybersecurity is not typically the sexiest thing to talk about on on media, but it's so key, and it underpins everything else. Our lives don't work if the internet isn't secure, and if the rest of these things don't function. So, any closing thoughts before we do the wrap up here?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to make cybersecurity sexy again. So thank you very much. I would say that if anybody is interested in integrating this technology, you can do it today. Reach out. We'd be happy to show you how it works, and happy to improve your system, so that way you don't have to pay that $6 million or wait 292 days to figure out somebody stole your info.
There you go. All right, Bryan, thanks again. We'll talk soon. And so as Bryan makes his exit here, we're going to pick 2 comments of the day that we're going to give awards to, because we actually forgot to do it last week because my internet cut out about 6 minutes before the show ended. Maybe because of the CrowdStrike situation, now that I think about it. But yeah, so let's pick out 2 good ones. Let's see, a little chit chat between. All right,
on stage. Woo.
Yo. Right. So I think we give them to Hector and Face, because Face is always here, always asking the good ones, and I'd be willing to bet we could get someone like Zap next week, who's also on quite a bit. So let's make it those.
Okay. We're gonna come to a quorum, and we'll be right back with the announcement of the comment of the day winner.
All right, we're doing 2 because we didn't do one last week. So we're going Hector and Face for comment of the week this week and last. So we got Hector with, why did CERTIHASH choose to use a blockchain instead of a solution like DigiCert, which is a really good question. And then Uncle Josh here for the black box. And also, he's a naked hot dog guy, as we discovered at the end of this conversation. And frankly, if I can't have any toppings at all, actually a completely naked hot dog is one of the best ways to hit your protein, fat, and carb macros in one simple. Oh, here's a good one. Is a hot dog a sandwich? So I'm going to leave you with that, everybody. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Let's so if you are one of the winners, so we got Hector and Face, please reach out to Alex Vidal at Costly Signals on X, and he will make it work with sending you the stuff from our Champions TCG folks, which again, thank you guys. Go check out Champions TCG across X. Thank you also to Rock Wallet for your sponsorship, CoinGeek for publishing this crazy show. Thank you to Mr. Vidal for rocking the producer role, and thank you to God for not having the thunder and lightning kick out my internet so I could actually do a whole show this week. Most of all, however, thank you to you for watching. If you're watching live, you are the best of us. Thank you for making everything possible, for giving me something to do from 2 to 3 every single Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm going to wrap this up because it's my wife's birthday, and I think we're going to go out for some dinner. I love you, everybody. Be good to each other, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.
The time is now, champions, to war! Be gone, little one.